So it's been a long time since I've gone 0-3 at an armory, but a few weeks back I took home the pity pack on my boy Fi. Now, the positive of that, though, was that I was trying a different build of sorts, which gave me some good learnings on where I needed to optimize, not just on what isn't going to work and why, but also what I could do to make it more robust. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my friends, and welcome back to the channel, and happy Flesh and Blood Monday. So today we're going to have a chat about our less popular, at least right now, Draconic Ninja, and that's my boy Fi here. So as I mentioned a few weeks back, I took him to our armory, and I ended up going Goose Egg and 3, and it is what it is, but to be fair to both myself and him here, it was one of those nights where, things just weren't going our way, but I was also trying something different, which just ended up not being as consistent as I'd hoped for, right? You all know how it is, right? A few bad hands, it's a card game, it happens, but after you kind of have a full night full of bad hands, it's really time to start, having an honest discussion that maybe you miscalculated the build, which I think I did. And out of that, I got some learnings, which I do appreciate, because right now I see two angles by which we can approach Fi. So today what I wanted to do was chat the advantages and the drawbacks of each, and then explore how the builds need to change for optimization. Now, previously to the Hunted, the two ways to build Fi was as simple as the weapon choice. Going with the harmonized Kodachis was a play for longer chains and engaging Rupture easier. With 2 onboard attacks every turn, this enables Fi to extend his combat chain, potentially triggering effects like Mask of Momentum or other abilities that benefit from multiple chain links like Ruptures or Hit Triggers or something like Salt in the Wound. This build was more about a swarm or chip damage type strategy, landing many small hits with maybe one big one at the end to overwhelm the opponent. The trade-off, though, was a lack of Draconic cards, and it wasn't uncommon to have turns where it didn't trigger a Phoenix Flame activation on Fi at all, meaning that the build was largely using Fi merely for his card pool rather than his ability. By contrast, the Draconic Emberblade line leans into bigger, more impactful attacks and leverages Fi's ability to recur Phoenix Flame. Emberblade Fi is about the quality of attacks, leading with a stronger weapon and utilizing Phoenix Flame for efficient damage, often resulting in more burst-oriented turns. The weakness of this build, though, is that it needs very specific cards with which to start the chain. Not drawing a Draconic card with Natural Go Again means Emberblade fails to start. Now, the Kodachi Fi line has largely fallen out of favor since the banning of Art of War, which actually makes sense if you think about it, considering that the Emberblade build is more consistent in the damage it can apply, if admittedly less robust. And so much so, actually, that in the Arsenal Pass episode headed into Pro Tour, my Fab Crush Pankaj stated that there is only one way to play our boy. And now, while I don't agree, I do get it, because the two ways, with air quotes here, that we're discussing are really just a package switch of a handful of cards, and both are using Emberblades. So in historical context, it's a true statement, right? But hey, Flesh and Blood is all about those small gains, and I think that if I can somehow figure out how to optimize Fi on a fealty-focused build, that there is potential. So what am I talking about exactly? Well, with the Hunted, we got a new type of Draconic Ninja piece, one which wants to be Draconic for an added bonus. The Art of Dragon arc offers a lot of value if they can come in as Draconic cards, off, say, a Brand with Cinderclaw, or by using a fealty token. In particular, I'm interested in the 2 damage from Art of Dragon Fire, and potentially the equipment destruction off of Art of Dragon Scale. Now, obviously, Fi doesn't generate fealty in the same way that Syndra does, but that doesn't outright exclude him from this playstyle, and in fact, I think there is significant upside in doing so. Now obviously, at 0-3, my first dab did not work, but I'm not ready to give up quite yet. Admittedly, the mistake I made was trying to do too much all at the same time. My build that night was leaning very heavily into Devotion Never Dies. Devotion Never Dies is a 1/4 red ninja card, non-draconic, but says when this hits, if a draconic attack was the last attack this combat chain, banish this. If you do, you may play it this turn and go again. Now let's be clear, Devotion Never Dies doesn't actually itself want to be draconic, rather it looks at the previous link. But obviously, if you do setups where you make it draconic, then you can chain it off of itself and maintain the threat and just keep coming as long as you have the resources to do so. Now, the logic of using this card is actually pretty solid in of itself, right? At worst, it's a 1/4 chain starter, and given that my previous Emberblade build was running Bittering Thorns, it was actually a decent 1-to-1 swap. And all you Talishar kids should cover your ears for a second, because this combo build was doing stupid things on Talishar. But in real life, not so much. Yeah, I know. Go figure, right? So, great story, Andrew. What's the learning already? Patience, patience, young Padawan, because I'm going to get you there. Because through the sequencing of the setups and trying to do stupid devotion things, I actually realized how easily Fi can do draconic setups. Specifically with the addition of one card, which I have since swapped into the Ronin Renegade Red slot, and that is Display Loyalty. Display Loyalty is a 0/3 ninja card, but says if you control 2 or more draconic links, this gets go again and when this attacks a hero, create a fealty token. But Andrew, that's a Syndra card. Yep, but it works here too. And I get it in terms of downside, it's not a fire starter. Hey, so just a quick editor's note for those of you who hadn't necessarily been on the Fi train for the last several years, you might not actually be familiar with the term fire starter that I just used, because I coined it here and it didn't really catch on across the community. But I use that term here to define a draconic red card that can start the chain, like Rising, Mounting, Soaring Brand, and so on. So that's what I mean when you hear me refer to a fire starter. Now, yes, I do acknowledge the trade-off of going down a fire starter. As I mentioned, Display Loyalty is taking the spot, at least in my build of Ronin Renegade. But swapping in a card that goes for 3 and generates us a fealty, merely assuming it's in the correct position, has very good value, especially when we revisit again the Art of Dragon concept. So if these cards are draconic, meaning if I either brand them or I pop a fealty, our value on these goes to Cray Cray Town. So the learning here is that a typical Draconic Emberblade shell with a couple pieces of spice added in could increase the ceiling significantly with only a 3-card Firestarter penalty as the floor. And at the same time, with the Hunted, we actually got a new Firestarter, which we are absolutely playing because it's crazy good, and that's Ignite. It's so apropos too, as it's igniting the chain. I freaking love this card. So with that realization, it gave birth to 2 new angles on Fi. A rigid and traditionally efficient Draconic Emberblade build, the functional same type of deck that really hasn't done anything since Worlds 23. Or we can actually try an evolved, higher ceiling build with a slightly higher setup requirement, and yes, with that, slightly higher risk. Now, I've run down my Draconic Emberblade Fi list for you many times in the past, and short of the occasional sideboard choices, the Emberblade Draconic line really hasn't moved, with the exception, of course, Devotion swapping and Forbittering. So I'll link a video here and I'll save you your time with that. But for the new build, let's check out where I'm at today. All right, folks, so what you see here is my Art of Draconic Fi, and this is my several iterative build, and I am still working on it, but I really wanted to show you where I'm at in terms of kind of the concept and what I'm trying to do here. So from a pure Emberblade standpoint, the loadout makes complete sense. I'm not cracking any eggs there, right? Now we do go into what you see is we have 3 Dragon Fires. We have a full arc of brand. We have the 3 display loyalties, which makes sense. We talked about it. Ignite, of course, like I said, love that card. Not going in. Absolutely going in. Let's just say that the right way. Now, I do still have Mounting Angry in here. I have had to sack Soaring, which I did like for Snatch. But again, if you're comparing it to Ignite and you have to have room for the pitch for Art of Dragon, that makes sense. And we were able to bring in 2 Oath of Loyalties, which in of itself is kind of a fire starter. It is a fire starter. It's just a very restricted fire starter in terms of what else you can play. We are on 2 Salt of Wounds, and then on Rowdy Locals and Soulbead Strike. Now, I didn't list out every card, but a lot of these lists build themselves, right? So the key here is, if you really look at this, we haven't changed all that much, but in terms of how this plays, it's significantly different, right? In terms of just not puking, you have to do some setup type stuff. You'll also know a card that's missing here. I'm only playing Lava Vein, and I'm not playing the new card, which is hot on their heels. I did originally, and actually in my Emberblade build, or my traditional Emberblade build, I should say, I do have both of them. In this build, there's really just not enough room. Plus, again, it of itself is not a fire starter, so it kind of needed to come out to make things work and get the ratios correct. So again, love the card, blocks for 3. but not right for this build. So anyway, I have the link below. You can give it some shots. I'd love to get your feedback. I do think the ratio. Oh, one thing I skipped over. I do have one copy of Scale in the sideboard because that could really hurt Necromancer right now. And there's some other people who I wouldn't mind giving that to, like Valiant Dynamo and Fang and all that. So, but that I think is appropriate as just a one of, because we don't have a lot of room. We still need to have poppers in here for a little bit of defense. Need to be able to go pretty strong. But leaning into, I mean, again, that's a 1 for 7. Interestingly enough, there's the other dragon card that is I think it's a base 4 and it gets +3. I decided to not go with that. It just didn't seem. It felt like there was better ways to get 1 point less of damage than having to pay for it. But Art of Dragon, be able to just do that 2 damage out seems pretty good. So anyway, that's the build and that's the logic. Let me know your feedback. Let me know your thoughts. I would really like to get Fi to work again. And I think in order to make that work, we're going to have to get creative. So this is my stab at it. I'm going to continue to iterate on it. Let me know your thoughts and go commando. Hey there, my friends. So this is a bit of an Easter egg bonus for those of you that decided to stick around. So I'd like to walk you through a little nugget that I've kind of stumbled into accidentally that I really love. It's a cheeky play, if you will, with air quotes, in conjunction with Fi and Rowdy Locals. So Rowdy Locals here is a really good, solid include. Now, to be clear, with Emberblade, we don't need our blues to be 0 cost. This is kind of a carryover from the Kodachi days. But this card really makes a lot of sense when we, put it in perspective of like Soulbeat and stuff like that. So if this is defended by an action card, it gets +2. So they are very disincentivized to block this card, and a lot of time it's going to hit. And when this hits a hero, you can discard a card, and if you do, they discard a card. So where they're going to get wonky about this is if they don't want to lose a card in their hand. So they'll maybe throw something at this, maybe they'll bleed 1, maybe they'll just let this hit thinking you don't have a card in hand, and they'll let this bleed. So what you can do with Fi is if you're able to string together enough to where he's free, and you haven't triggered, obviously you haven't triggered the instant yet because that's the play here, right? But if you can get Fi free and then end with a Rowdy Locals, if they don't block thinking that they're going to be fine and not lose the card, right? They've planned their turn. You can Fi, pop the Phoenix Flame back to your hand, discard the Phoenix Flame, which is no net cost to you other than the fact that you didn't deal them for 1 damage, and they've got to get rid of a card. That is dirty play, and it happens more often than you think, right? Because again, you put blues at the bottom. If you ever do get to second cycle with Fi, it's a play. It's a real play. So anyway, just think about it when you're playing. Remember, if you have Rowdy Locals and you plan on ending with it, maybe you've got 2 blues in your hand, whatever. If you plan on ending with Rowdy Locals, don't activate Fi because you can use that as a ping. And worst case scenario, if you're doing that, because you wouldn't be doing it with a card in hand anyway, because you don't want to lose it, right? Worst case scenario, you tuck your Phoenix Flame into the graveyard, into the arsenal. Then even if they CNC or gets blown up, it's back in your graveyard anyway, right? So it's like a no net loss, no penalty, free card from their hand, because who's going to block this, right? It's a bad block in most cases. So anyway, it was more of a bit of a short eater. It was not short, but here we are. And go commando.